The wind was restless that night. It pushed against the windows of the small village houses and howled through the cracks of the wooden doors. The moon hid behind dark clouds, and the whole land seemed to be holding its breath. In the middle of the village square, standing silently like a sleeping giant, was a drum. It was not an ordinary drum. The drum was tall, taller than any man, carved from the trunk of an ancient tree that had stood in the forest for hundreds of years. Its body was polished smooth, and the leather stretched across its top was made from the hide of a sacred animal. Around the edges, strange symbols had been carved, symbols that no one in the village could read anymore. Some said they were the language of spirits. Some said they were the words of forgotten kings. And it was this drum that began to speak that night. A boy named Daniel was the first to hear it. Daniel was only 12 years old, thin as a stick, with curious eyes that seemed too big for his face. He often wondered where he shouldn't, sneaking into the forest, listening at doors, and asking questions that annoyed the grown-ups. His mother said curiosity would get him into trouble one day, but Daniel could not help himself. That night, Daniel could not sleep. He lay on the small mat in his family's hut, listening to the whistling of the wind. Something inside him felt strange, like an invisible hand pulling him to the village square. He tried to close his eyes, but the feeling grew stronger. Finally, he sat up, pushed the mat aside, and crept out of the hut. The village was quiet. Everyone was asleep. The only sound was the creaking of old trees and the distant hoot of an owl. Daniel walked barefoot across the dusty ground until he reached the square. And there, in the pale light of the half-hidden moon, he saw it. The drum was glowing. It was not a bright glow, but a faint, strange shimmer, as though moonlight itself had been trapped inside its wooden body. Daniel's heart pounded. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was dreaming. But no, when he opened them again, the drum was still glowing. Then, suddenly, a sound came from it. Dum, dum, dum. The sound was low and deep, like the beating of a giant heart. Daniel froze. There was no drummer. No one stood near the drum. The sound was coming by itself. His mouth went dry, but he could not move. Then the drum spoke. "Children of men," it said in a voice that was neither loud nor soft, but clear enough to fill the air, "awake and listen." Daniel's eyes widened. A drum had spoken. He wanted to run, but his legs refused to move. His body trembled as the drum continued. "Long have you forgotten the old ways? Long have you turned your ears from the forest and your eyes from the sky? But the night remembers. The earth remembers. And I remember." The sound of the voice shook Daniel's bones. He gasped for breath, clutching his chest. The drum went on. "A shadow walks among you. A shadow born of greed and lies. If you do not listen, your land will be swallowed. If you do not act, your children will cry tears of fire." Daniel finally found his strength and fell to his knees. His lips trembled. Who are you?" he whispered. The drum answered. "I am the keeper of stories. I am the voice of the forgotten. I am the drum that speaks when the world is asleep. Remember me, child, for soon the others must know." Before Daniel could speak again, the glow faded. The sound stopped. The drum returned to silence, standing still as if nothing had happened. Daniel sat on the ground, shaking. His mind raced. Had he imagined it? Was it a dream? But no, his ears still rang with the sound of the drum's voice, and his heart still beat like a frightened bird. He knew it was real. He stood up slowly and backed away from the square, his eyes fixed on the silent drum. Then he turned and ran as fast as his legs could carry him, all the way back to his hut. He lay down, pulling the mat over his head, but sleep would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the glowing drum and heard the words, "A shadow walks among you." The next morning, Daniel tried to tell his mother. She was busy pounding yam outside their hut when he rushed to her side. "Mother! Mother! The drum spoke last night." His mother frowned, not looking up from her walk. "What foolishness is that, Daniel? Go and fetch water from the stream." "No, Daniel insisted. The drum was glowing, and it spoke. It said. "Enough," she snapped, hitting the pestle harder into the mortar. "Drums do not speak. You had a dream. Do not go about filling people's heads with nonsense." Daniel bit his lip. He wanted to argue, but his mother's eyes warned him not to. He picked up the clay pot and went to the stream, his thoughts heavy. All day, he kept wondering about the drum's words. "A shadow walks among you." What shadow? What danger? He wanted to tell someone who would believe him, but he did not know who. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the villagers gathered in the square to share stories and laughter, Daniel sat quietly at the edge of the crowd. His eyes kept drifting toward the drum. It stood there, tall and silent, as if mocking him. An old man named Elder Thomas noticed Daniel's strange look. Elder Thomas was the oldest man in the village, his hair as white as ash and his eyes clouded but sharp in spirit. He walked with a staff and spoke slowly, but everyone respected him. He came and sat beside Daniel. "Young one," Elder Thomas said, his voice gentle, "why do you stare at the drum as if it holds your soul?" Daniel hesitated. Should he tell? If he told and Elder Thomas laughed at him, he would feel foolish. But something about the elder's eyes gave him courage. So he whispered, "The drum spoke to me last night." For a long moment, Elder Thomas said nothing. His face was calm, but his hand tightened on his staff. Finally, he asked, "What did it say?" Daniel repeated the words as best as he could remember. When he finished, Elder Thomas's eyes looked far away, as if seeing something beyond the horizon. He nodded slowly. "You are young, but the spirits sometimes choose the young," the elder murmured. "Do not fear, child. What you heard is not madness." Daniel's heart leaped. "So you believe me?" Elder Thomas turned to him, his face grave. "I believe. And I fear. For if the drum has spoken again, it means the time has come." "The time for what?" Daniel asked, his voice small. "The time for secrets to rise," Elder Thomas said. "The time for shadows to walk. The drum speaks only when danger is near." A chill ran through Daniel's body. The elder's words made the drum's warning sound even more terrifying. That night, Daniel lay awake again, staring at the ceiling of the hut. He knew his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a curious boy. He was the only one who had heard the drum speak, and now he carried its message. And somewhere in the dark, unseen and silent, the shadow the drum had spoken of was already moving. The next morning, the village woke up as usual. Roosters crowed, women swept the sandy paths, children laughed and ran with sticks in their hands, and men prepared for work in the fields. Life moved as if nothing had happened. But Daniel carried the drum's voice inside him like a heavy stone. He could not forget the glowing wood, the deep voice, and the strange warning. "A shadow walks among you." He repeated those words in his head again, and each time he shivered. Who was the shadow? What did it mean? Was it a person, or a spirit, or something even worse? He wanted to ask Elder Thomas, but the elder was nowhere to be seen that morning. Daniel fetched water, helped his mother grind peppers, and played with the other boys, but his eyes were always searching, his ears always listening. By evening, his restlessness grew so strong that he could not keep it inside anymore. He ran to Elder Thomas's hut, which stood at the edge of the village near the giant Iroko tree. The old man was sitting outside, polishing his staff. "Elder," Daniel said, panting, "please tell me what the drum meant. You said it speaks only when danger is near." "What danger?" Elder Thomas looked at him with tired eyes. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he sighed deeply and motioned for Daniel to sit. "My boy," he began slowly, "this drum is older than this village. Older than your grandfather, and even his grandfather before him. It was not made only to call people together or to play at festivals. No, it was made as a guard." "A guard?" Daniel asked, confused. "Yes. A guard of truth. When lies or evil grow strong in the land, the drum speaks. It warns the people, but only a few can hear it. Sometimes a chosen one, sometimes an elder. This time, it chose you." Daniel's eyes widened. "Me? But why me? I am only a boy." "Because the young see what the old ignore," Elder Thomas said. "Because the innocent are open to voices the proud cannot hear." Daniel lowered his head. He did not feel special, only afraid. "But what is the shadow?" he asked. The elder leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "The shadow may not be a spirit at all. It may be a man. Sometimes, evil wears the face of a friend. Sometimes the one you trust most carries the darkness." Daniel swallowed hard. A man in the village. Could it be someone he knew? Someone's father, brother, or uncle? Before he could ask more, a loud cry echoed through the village. Both Daniel and Elder Thomas turned. A group of women was running from the square, shouting, "Help! Help! The barn has been broken into." Daniel and the elder hurried after them. When they reached the square, a crowd had already gathered near the communal barn where the village stored yams for the season. The door had been forced open, and the neat stacks of food were scattered. Half of the yams were missing. "Thieves!" someone cried. "Who could have done this?" another shouted. Men muttered angrily, women shook their heads, and children clung to their mothers' legs. The chief of the village, a tall man named Chief Harrod, arrived with his guards. His face was dark with anger. "Who dares steal from the hands of the people?" he thundered. "This food is for us all. This is wickedness." No one answered. The villagers looked at one another with suspicion, but no one admitted guilt. Daniel's heart raced. The words of the drum came back to him, "A shadow walks among you." Could this theft be the shadow's work? He wanted to shout that the drum had warned them, but he held his tongue. His mother's scolding voice echoed in his head, "Do not go about filling people's heads with nonsense." But Elder Thomas, standing beside him, leaned on his staff and muttered, "It begins." Daniel glanced at him, but the elder's face was grave and unreadable. The villagers cleaned up the mess, grumbling with anger and fear. Chief Harold promised that the thief would be found and punished. Guards were ordered to watch the barn day and night. But even as the crowd dispersed, whispers filled the air. People began to look at one another differently, with doubt in their eyes. That night, Daniel could not sleep again. He lay staring at the roof, listening for the drum. But the square was silent. He tossed and turned, wondering who had stolen the yams. Was it a hungry family? Or was it the shadow the drum had spoken of? At last, unable to bear it, he crept out of his hut once more. The village was dark, the moon hidden again. He tiptoed to the square and stood before the silent drum. "Please," he whispered, touching its smooth wood, "speak again. Tell me what to do. Who is the shadow?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, faintly, so faintly he thought he was imagining it, the drum gave a single beat. "Dum." Daniel jumped back. Then the voice came, low and heavy. "The shadow wears a smile. The shadow hides in plain sight. Trust no face, trust no hand. Watch the ones who laugh the loudest." Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to ask more, but the drum grew silent again. The glow faded, and the night swallowed its voice. The boy stood there, trembling. The shadow wears a smile. Who in the village smiled the most? Who laughed the loudest? He thought of the chief, who always smiled at gatherings. He thought of Mr. Benson, the hunter, who was known for his booming laugh. He thought of young men who joked and sang in the evenings. How could he know which one was the shadow? He ran back to Elder Thomas's hut. The old man was still awake, sitting by a small fire. Elder Daniel gasped. The drum spoke again. It said the shadow wears a smile and hides in plain sight. The elder's eyes flickered in the firelight. Then we must watch closely. Evil often hides behind laughter. You must be my eyes and ears, boy. See who the drum points to. Daniel nodded, though fear twisted in his stomach. Over the next days, he watched everyone in the village. He watched the men working, the women gossiping, the children playing. He watched who smiled, who laughed, who looked guilty. But the more he watched, the more confused he became. Everyone smiled sometimes. Everyone laughed. How could he know which smile was false? One evening, as the villagers gathered for storytelling, Daniel sat apart, his eyes scanning the faces. He noticed something strange. Chief Harold, the proud leader, was laughing louder than anyone. His white teeth flashed in the firelight, his shoulders shook, and his voice boomed. Everyone laughed with him. But when Daniel looked into the chief's eyes, he saw something cold there. Something that did not match the joy of his laughter. A chill crawled up Daniel's spine. Could it be? Could the shadow be the chief himself? He wanted to tell Elder Thomas, but fear gripped his tongue. How could a boy accuse the chief? Who would believe him? That night, when everyone had gone to sleep, Daniel crept again to the drum. His small hand rested on its wooden side. Please, he whispered desperately, tell me if it is the chief. Tell me if he is the shadow. The drum gave 3 beats, slow and heavy. Dum, dum, dum. Then the voice spoke. The hand that steals wears the crown. The mouth that lies speaks sweetly. The shadow sits where honor should sit. Daniel staggered back, his breath caught in his throat. The drum was saying the chief himself was the shadow. Fear and disbelief filled him. Chief Harold was the most respected man in the village. He decided punishments, settled disputes, and gave speeches about unity. How could he be the one stealing from the people? But the drum had spoken. Daniel pressed his back against the wall of the square, shaking. He knew the truth now, but he also knew something else. If he told anyone, Chief Harold would never forgive him. A boy accusing the chief. He could be punished, even banished. And yet, if he stayed silent, the shadow would grow stronger. He stood there in the moonlight, his heart caught between fear and courage, knowing that the days ahead would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. The next morning, Daniel woke with a heavy heart. He had not slept at all. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the chief's smiling face, and he heard the drum's words. The hand that steals wears the crown. The mouth that lies speaks sweetly. The shadow sits where honor should sit. He shivered at the thought. Chief Harold was the most powerful man in the village. Everyone respected him, even feared him. If Daniel told anyone the truth, who would believe him? A boy against a chief, it was like a sparrow challenging an eagle. But the drum had chosen him. The responsibility sat on his small shoulders like a load too heavy to carry. At breakfast, he could barely eat the yam his mother served. She scolded him for being restless. Daniel, what is wrong with you? You look like a goat that has seen a lion. Eat, so you can have strength for the day. He forced the food into his mouth, but the taste was like ash. His mind was filled only with one thought: what should he do about the chief? Later that day, he went again to Elder Thomas. The old man sat in front of his hut, weaving a rope from palm fibers. Elder, Daniel whispered, glancing around to be sure no one was near. The drum spoke again last night. The elder's hands paused. And what did it say this time? Daniel's voice trembled. It said, "The hand that steals wears the crown. The shadow sits where honor should sit." For a long moment, Elder Thomas was silent. His cloudy eyes turned to the sky, and his mouth pressed into a thin line. "So," he said at last, "the drum has pointed to the chief." Daniel gasped. "You believe it too?" The elder nodded slowly. "Yes. I have suspected for some time. The barn was not robbed by strangers. Our guards would have seen them. Only someone with authority could walk so boldly in the night. And the chief has grown greedy in recent moons. He has built himself a bigger hut, wears new cloth, and holds feast while others struggle." Daniel's heart pounded. "Then what should we do?" Elder Thomas looked at him gravely. "We must be wise. To accuse the chief without proof is dangerous. He will call it rebellion. The people may not believe us. We must find evidence, something that cannot be denied." Daniel bit his lip. "How?" The elder placed a bony hand on his shoulder. "Watch. Listen. The drum has chosen you. Trust its voice, but also use your eyes. The truth will show itself." Daniel nodded, though fear still sat heavy in his chest. That evening, the villagers gathered in the square again. A storyteller was reciting tales of brave hunters and cunning tortoises. Children clapped and laughed, women hummed, and men cheered. But Daniel's eyes never left Chief Harrod. The chief sat proudly at the front, his large body draped in fine cloth, his white smile shining in the firelight. He laughed loudly at every joke, clapped his hands at every clever twist of the tale. To everyone else, he looked like a happy, generous leader enjoying the evening with his people. But Daniel saw something else. He saw how the chief's eyes flicked from person to person, sharp and calculating, as if weighing their loyalty. He saw how his hands toyed with a golden bracelet, far finer than anything the villagers could afford. Where had he gotten such wealth? The drum's words echoed again in his mind, "The mouth that lies speaks sweetly." Daniel clenched his fist. He wanted to stand up and shout the truth, but his voice would be drowned by laughter. Who would believe a boy against the chief? So he kept quiet. He watched. That night, when the crowd had gone to sleep, Daniel made a bold decision. He would follow the chief. The moon was hidden again, and the village lay in darkness. Daniel crept from his hut, his small feet making no sound on the sandy ground. He moved like a shadow, keeping to the edges of the huts, hiding whenever he heard footsteps. At last, he saw the chief. Harold was leaving his hut quietly, carrying a sack over his shoulder. He glanced left and right before heading toward the barn. Daniel's heart raced. He followed at a distance, ducking behind trees and walls. His body shook with fear, but he forced himself to move. The chief reached the barn, looked around once more, then slipped inside. Daniel crouched near the doorway, holding his breath. Through a crack in the wood, he saw him. The chief opened the sack. Inside were fresh yams, taken from the communal store. He stacked them quickly, covering them with cloth, then tied the sack again. His movements were quick. Practice. This was not the first time he had done it. Daniel's eyes widened. The drum was right. The chief was stealing from his own people. But where was he taking the food? The boy followed as the chief carried the sack through the forest path behind the village. The trees loomed tall, their branches swaying in the night wind. Strange sounds echoed from the darkness, and Daniel's skin prickled with fear. But he did not stop. At last, they reached a clearing. And there, Daniel saw something that made his blood run cold. The chief was not alone. In the clearing stood 3 strangers, tall men dressed in dark cloth. Their faces were hidden, but their voices were low and harsh. The chief dropped the sack at their feet, and one of the men opened it, nodding in approval. "You will have more tomorrow," Chief Harrod said in a low voice. But remember our bargain. You will give me the iron and the coins you promised. One of the strangers tossed him a small bag. The chief caught it and smiled greedily. Daniel's heart pounded. The chief was trading the people's food for wealth. He was selling their yams to strangers, filling his pockets while his own people struggled. The boy's fist clenched with anger. He wanted to scream, to run into the clearing and shout, "Thief, betrayer," but his small body would be no match for the men. He forced himself to stay hidden, biting his lip so hard it almost bled. At last, the chief shook hands with the strangers, lifted the empty sack, and walked back toward the village. The men melted into the forest shadows. Daniel waited until they were gone, then ran as fast as he could back to Elder Thomas. His chest burned, his breath came in gasps, but he did not stop until he burst into the elder's hut. "Elder, elder," he cried. I saw the chief with my own eyes." Elder Thomas sat up, startled. "What did you see, boy?" Daniel told him everything, how the chief had stolen from the barn, carried the sack into the forest, and traded it with the strangers for money and iron. His words stumbled out in a rush, his eyes shining with both fear and anger. The elder listened quietly, his face grave. When Daniel finished, he nodded. "The drum spoke true," he said. "The shadow sits on the chief's seat. What do we do now?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. The elder leaned heavily on his staff. "We must show the people the truth. But it will not be easy. The chief has power. If we accuse him without proof, he will deny it, and the people will side with him. We must find a way for the truth to reveal itself." Daniel frowned. "But how?" The elder's eyes glimmered. "Sometimes, a thief sets his own trap. The drum has chosen you, boy. Watch, wait, and when the moment comes, strike with truth like a spear." Daniel nodded, though his heart pounded with fear. He was only a child. How could he fight a chief, a man respected by all? But deep inside, a small flame of courage began to burn. The drum had chosen him, and he could not turn back now. That night, as he lay on his mat, he whispered to himself, "I will not be silent. The truth must come out." And far away, in the silent square, the drum gave a single, heavy beat, as if answering him. Dumb. The village looked the same in the sunlight: children chasing chickens, women pounding yam, men sharpening cutlasses, but to Daniel, everything had changed. He walked through the dusty paths carrying water for his mother, yet every time he passed someone smiling, he thought of the drum's words. The shadow wears a smile. The hand that steals wears the crown. He glanced often at Chief Harold's large hut. The man came out that morning wearing a bright red robe, his chest heavy with beads, his face glowing with false joy. The villagers greeted him with respect, bowing their heads. The chief lifted his hand in blessing, his teeth flashing as he smiled. But Daniel saw the truth behind that smile. He carried his pot of water to Elder Thomas's hut after his chores. The old man sat outside with his staff, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Daniel placed the pot down and whispered, "Elder, we must do something. Every day the chief steals more, and the people suffer." The elder nodded slowly. "Yes, but we must not rush. The truth must be revealed in a way that none can deny. The drum has chosen you, and with its help, the shadow will fall." Daniel clenched his fist. "But how? He hides his crime well. Only I saw him trade the food." The elder tapped his staff on the ground. "Then we must bring him to the drum itself. The drum that speaks at night is the witness none can argue against." Daniel's eyes widened. "You mean, the drum will speak before everyone? If the spirits will it," the elder said, "yes. But we must create the moment." That afternoon, Elder Thomas called a gathering. He told the people that strange things were happening in the village, that secrets lay hidden in the dark. He spoke of the ancient drum and how it was not only for festivals but for truth. The villagers murmured among themselves, curious and uneasy. Chief Harrod laughed loudly, raising his hand. "Elder, why fill people's heads with old tales? A drum is a drum. It does not speak." But Elder Thomas's voice was firm. "If the chief has nothing to hide, he will not fear the drum." The people looked at their leader. Some nodded, agreeing with the elder. Others looked uneasy, unsure. The chief's eyes narrowed for a moment, but then he smiled again, wide and false. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Let the people gather. Let us see if this drum of stories will speak." "I fear nothing." Daniel's stomach twisted. The chief's confidence was frightening. But Elder Thomas whispered to him, "Do not fear. The guilty man always believes his lies will protect him." That night, the villagers gathered in the square. Torches flickered, casting long shadows on the ground. The drum stood tall at the center, silent but heavy with presence. Men, women, and children surrounded it, their faces filled with both excitement and fear. Elder Thomas stepped forward, leaning on his staff. "People of the village," he said, his voice strong despite his age, "tonight we call on the ancient drum, the keeper of truth. If there is deceit among us, let the drum reveal it." The crowd murmured. Some bowed their heads. Others glanced nervously at the chief. Chief Harrod stepped forward with a loud laugh. "I stand before you without fear. If this old piece of wood can speak, let it speak now. I have nothing to hide." Daniel's heart pounded. His eyes fixed on the drum. Would it speak? Would it remain silent and make him look like a liar? For a long moment, nothing happened. The villagers shuffled their feet. Some whispered, "It is only a drum. The elder is chasing shadows." The chief smiled proudly, spreading his arms. "You see? Only silence. Now, let us end this foolishness." But just as he turned to leave, a low sound rolled across the square. "Dum." The villagers froze. "Dum, dum." The sound grew louder, deeper, as though the earth itself was beating. The children gasped. The women clutched their shawls. Even the men stepped back in fear. Then the voice came. "Children of men, hear me. The shadow is here. The thief walks among you. The hand that steals wears the crown." The crowd gasped in shock. All eyes turned toward Chief Harrod. The chief's face went pale, but he forced a laugh. "This is trickery. Someone hides behind the drum." He rushed forward and struck the drum with his hand, but no one was there. The drum stood tall and untouched, its voice still echoing. The shadow smiles to deceive. The shadow trades your food for silver. The shadow betrays his people. The villagers erupted in cries. The chief is the shadow." "No, no," the chief shouted, his voice breaking. "It is a lie. I am your leader." Elder Thomas lifted his staff. "The drum has spoken. Will you deny the spirits themselves?" Daniel stepped forward, his small voice trembling but clear. "I saw him. I followed him into the forest. I saw him give our yams to strangers. I saw him take their money." The crowd turned to Daniel, their faces filled with shock. Then their eyes swung back to the chief. Chief Harrod's mask cracked. Anger flashed in his eyes. "You dare accuse me, boy? I should crush you where you stand." The villagers gasped at his threat. A leader should protect children, not harm them. His words revealed his guilt more than anything. The drum thundered once more, louder than before. "Dum dum dum. The truth is spoken. The thief is revealed. The shadow must fall." Panic filled the chief's eyes. He dropped the mask of laughter and pride. With a snarl, he turned and ran, pushing through the crowd. "Catch him!" Elder Thomas shouted. The men of the village surged after him, their voices rising in fury. The women cried out, the children screamed, and the drum continued to beat, echoing across the night. Daniel stood frozen, his chest heaving, as he watched the people chase their leader. The truth had come out. The shadow was revealed. But in his heart, he knew the story was not yet over. The chief was cunning. He would not give up easily. That night, the village did not sleep. Fires burned bright as the men dragged the chief back, his fine robe torn, his beads broken. His face was twisted with rage, but his power was gone. The villagers shouted, "Thief, betrayer, shadow." Elder Thomas raised his staff. He has betrayed the people. He has betrayed the spirits. His place as leader is finished. But before the punishment could be decided, the chief spoke with a voice cold and bitter. "You think you have won, old man? You think a boy and a drum can defeat me? You know nothing of the men in the forest. They are coming. They will burn this village to the ground. You will all suffer." The crowd fell silent, fear flashing in their eyes. Daniel's heart sank. The strangers in the forest, the men who traded with the chief, they were still out there. And now, they might come for the whole village. The drum gave a single heavy beat, as if warning them. Dumb. Elder Thomas's face grew grim. The shadow has allies. The danger is not yet over. Daniel clenched his fist. He had revealed the truth, but the fight was only beginning. The night was heavy with silence. Not the usual silence that came with sleep, but the silence of waiting. The villagers sat outside their huts, their hearts beating fast. No one dared to sleep. Even the crickets and owls seemed to hide, as if they too were waiting for the sound of the drum. Old Mama Ejima sat near the big fire with her 2 grandchildren beside her. She whispered stories to them, her voice soft and shaky. "Remember, my children, the drum does not beat for nothing. It beats when it has something to say." The children clung to her wrapper and nodded, though they did not fully understand. They were afraid but also curious. The air was cold, and the flames of the fire danced, throwing shadows on the mud walls. Suddenly, the sound came. Boom, boom, boom. The drum spoke again, louder than before. This time, everyone heard it clearly. The sound did not come from far away. It came from the center of the village, from the sacred tree where the ancestors were honored. The villagers jumped up and rushed to the tree. Even Chief Adigwi came, his heavy beads rattling as he walked fast. The council of elders gathered too, each carrying a staff of authority. The drum continued to beat, but no one was there striking it. It moved on its own, as if an invisible hand was playing it. The villagers gasped and some even fell to their knees. Then, a voice came from the drum. "My children," the voice said, deep and powerful, like thunder rolling across the sky. "You have forgotten who you are." The people trembled. Some covered their ears, some cried, and some lifted their hands toward the sky. Chief Adigwi stepped forward, though his hands shook. "Who speaks through this drum? Is it the ancestors?" The voice continued, ignoring his question. "You have fought against each other. You have let greed, lies, and pride enter your hearts. You no longer share as your fathers shared. You no longer honor the land as your mothers honored it. Because of this, the land has dried, and your harvests have failed." The villagers looked at one another. The words pierced their hearts like sharp arrows. They remembered how they had been fighting over farmland, goats, and palm oil. They remembered how some people cheated others in the marketplace. Truly, their hearts had become bitter. One elder, poor Onyora, fell on his knees and cried, "Forgive us, O ancestors. Forgive us, we have forgotten the old ways." The voice from the drum grew softer, but it carried weight. Only when you return to unity, when you share with each other, and when you honor the land, will blessings return. If you do not, darkness will cover you. Then, the beating stopped. Silence filled the village again. The drum was still. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the people. Chief Adigui turned to his people. His voice shook as he said, "We have heard the voice of truth. It is not the madness of one man. It is the message for all of us." The elders nodded. For the first time in many years, the chief removed his crown and placed it on the ground. He stood bareheaded before the people. "I too have been guilty. I took more than I needed. I forgot my duty was to serve, not to rule. But from this day, I will change." The villagers could not believe what they were seeing. Their proud chief was humbling himself before them. Many began to cry. Then Mama Ejima stood, leaning on her stick. Her voice was strong despite her age. "Did I not tell you? The drum does not lie. When it speaks, we must listen. If we ignore it, we will bring ruin upon ourselves." The villagers shouted in agreement. "We will listen, we will change." The next day, the whole village gathered to make peace. Families who had not spoken for years embraced each other. Farmers shared their yams, fishermen shared their catch, and women shared their oil. Even children gave away their fruits. A cleansing ceremony was held under the sacred tree. The elders poured libations of palm wine on the roots, calling on the ancestors to forgive them. The drum was carried to the center of the circle, and everyone touched it with respect. From that day, the village began to change. The rains returned, the soil became rich, and their harvest grew plenty. The air was filled with laughter again. But the people never forgot the night the drum spoke. They told the story to their children, and their children told it to their grandchildren. Mama Ejima lived to see many more moons. Before she died, she told her grandchildren, "When you hear the drum, do not fear. Do not run. Listen. For the ancestors speak not to frighten you, but to guide you." Years later, whenever disputes arose, the elders would gather around the sacred tree and beat the drum. It never spoke again with its own voice, but the memory of that night kept everyone humble. And so, the drum that spoke at night became a legend. A story told around fires, a lesson whispered to young ones, and a reminder that unity, love, and respect for the land must never be forgotten. The voice of the drum was gone, but its message lived forever. The end.